I think the turning point in my journey was a year ago, and the line wrapped, oh, I don't even know how long the line was. The line was at least 2 hours long. So people were standing in line for one bottle of infant Tylenol drops that any of us could go to Target and pick up in a minute if we had a baby with a fever. It was 100% humidity. And it's the part of the jungle where it's so humid that the humidity is on the leaves in the trees. It's just that humid. And it was 90 some degrees. It was miserable, absolutely miserable. And yet these people were standing in line for infant Tylenol drops. And my eye caught this one woman, and I thought it was a baby about 2.5. It turned out she was 5. And the child had cerebral palsy. And she was as limp as a wet dish rag in this mother's arms. I knew from a distance that this was an extraordinarily ill baby. And she came up for infant Tylenol drops, and that child needed to be in a hospital. And fortunately, the lady that was with me spoke Spanish, knew how to hail the cab and get the baby on the ferry to the mainland, to the hospital, and she died. But I remember standing there thinking, who am I to say life's unfair? Yeah, my husband was killed in a car wreck, and yeah, I wanted more years with him. But I thought, this is unfair. Living like this is unfair. With 4 blankets for a wall. With having to stand in line for 2 hours for Tylenol drops. That's unfair. Who am I to say life's unfair? When you see how they have to live. They give birth on dirt floors, or in a hammock, which is, quite frankly, extremely impressive. How they move. I can't even get in a hammock, and these people give birth in a hammock without falling out. Like I would so be flipped out on the ground. They still have voodoo. They still have witchcraft, and so we work around that. But one thing I have learned, I don't speak a word of Spanish. But what I have learned is that caring for a sick or ailing mother or baby is the same in any language. All of my research from the very beginning of my career has always focused on health issues or women's health issues or infant health issues. And so before I came to the university, I was a doula. And a doula is kind of like a step below a midwife. We can do everything but deliver the baby. So we provide emotional and informational and physical support during labor and birth. So through the 80s and 90s, that's what I did before I came to K-State. And I've assisted in over, my gosh, at least 300 births. And so my heart has always been drawn towards women's health issues. And then one of my research projects that I did, when you're in that field, obstetrics, we don't always get perfect outcomes. Babies die. And that's why I came to the university, was to get my doctorate, because it was during the first Gulf War, and we had a 12-fold increase in the number of stillbirths that we had in this area. And I was very ill-equipped, very unprepared to deal with couples who lost a baby to stillbirth or neonatal death. So that was one of the first research projects that I did, was how does this impact their marriage, their relationship, their marital happiness, their satisfaction? What specifically does it do to a teenager when a teenager's job, their whole job through adolescence and through emerging adulthood, their first couple of years of college, is to find an identity that's separate from their parents. They have to learn who they are. And many times they land back on their parents' belief system. Many times they don't, but that's the task of adolescence and early adulthood is who am I? And so my research centered on what happens when a baby dies. Is that teenager thought of as the parent? Or do the parents step in and take over everything? And the parents step in and take over everything. And my research showed that really disrupts the teen's development. So, and then my next research was all about breast cancer. And while I was experiencing that, I developed programs for KU Med Center because even though we're dying, we still need to be touched. But couples are afraid to touch each other because they're dying, or they don't know where to touch their dying child, or they don't know where to touch their dying spouse, or they don't know where to touch their dying mom or dad. But we're human beings. We crave and we need that touch. So I created programs for that. I make prayer shawls for cancer clinics. I think there's a picture of one of our students who died of breast cancer wrapped in one of the prayer shawls that I made her. Pictures of her going through chemotherapy with it. I crochet baby blankets for the mortuaries for stillborn babies so the parents can have an item to remember their babies by. And there's a program called Dresses for Africa. And my goal this year is to make 100 dresses for little girls in Africa out of pillowcases, because the pillowcases are all embroidered. So I go to antique stores and try to find all these pillowcases, and then I turn them into little dresses for little girls in Africa. And so this is just an outcropping. It's a very natural outcropping since the HIV pandemic is happening in the Caribbean, and it's where my husband and I spent all of our time. And it's actually been a very healing and cathartic part of my journey since I lost Dave. But what I'm trying to do is start clinics in dive areas because we know that we have wealthy people who are wealthy enough to come and dive to these beautiful resorts. So they will bring donations and leave them at the dive resorts. And then those can be distributed to parts of the island that they would never, ever go to, dream of going to, want to go to. And one of those is in Roatan, one is in Cozumel. So the goal is to reduce the transmission of HIV through breastfeeding. So the goal is to teach mothers how to make bottles and to feed their babies through bottle feeding and not through breastfeeding. And that's a stigma. It's very stigmatized because if you see a mother with a bottle, you can make the assumption, and probably the accurate assumption, that because they don't have the extra money to go buy a baby bottle. That would be a luxury. The only reason they're using a baby bottle is because they have to. Whereas in our culture, we don't think twice about it. And so it's a process. They don't have pure water, so we have to have water purification tablets. They don't have formula, and so we count on people donating formula and bringing formula to the island. They don't have baby bottles. They don't have the slightest idea how often to feed a baby a bottle. They don't have refrigeration. And so the simplest thing of putting 4 scoops of baby infant formula into 8 ounces of water is not simple when you're in an area where there's feces in the street. It's not simple. So we have to purify the water. They want to put in 1 scoop instead of 4 to make the can of formula last, which doesn't provide the baby the adequate nutrition. They want to keep a bottle out for 8 hours if a baby doesn't finish it. It only lasts for 2, but they don't have refrigeration. So it really is a lot more involved and detailed than it sounds. And to get them to understand that they can still bond with the baby because they're baby wearers down there. They wear their babies everywhere, which is wonderful. We want that for attachment. And that it's okay to bottle feed. And you're not a bad mommy because you're bottle feeding. You're a responsible mom because you're bottle feeding. So it's cultural, totally cultural. And the one in Cozumel literally is in the middle of the jungle. And it's a shelter for abused women and children. And so we don't allow pictures in the jungle because people on the island would know where that is. And it's very secluded and it's overgrown on purpose. You know, now in Honduras, the clinic is known. And that's not a good situation because the government takes everything which is why we don't accept cash, because it would go straight to the government. And so the rules are extraordinarily strict. I don't even have any pictures of me with any babies because it's exploitive. And that's not what we're there for. So that's where my focus is right now. I am working, establishing, hoping to get service projects from the university, through the university, where we can take a group of students. There's 2 programs that other people have started called Tires for Houses. These people live with 4 strings tied around trees and blankets. If they're lucky, they have a goat or a cow, and the goat or the cow just comes in and out of the blankets. That's how they live. Cozumel, until the cruise industry discovered it in the 90s, was a sleepy fishing village. You know, so they have their rituals, but family is central. Family is absolutely central. It's a beautiful culture, beautiful people, just absolutely beautiful. But we could drive along the beach at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you would see 3-year-olds fishing for their dinner, 3 and 4-year-olds. And they'll set up a canopy. They'll get 4 sticks or driftwood and stick them in the sand and tie a blanket on it. And that's where they'll eat and sleep that night. Who are we to say that life's unfair? I've always been about hurting people, helping people who are hurting. And where are the service projects that offer help in that? But I also want to encourage students to really put yourself in the most uncomfortable place you can envision yourself. And you may end up in the Peace Corps and you don't even know it. You just don't know. The clinics are where my heart is. So we're in constant need of infant formula, Tylenol drops, and baby bottles. I make baby blankets for them. And there's a learning curve. I've never done this. I don't know what I'm doing. But I just know that I have a lot of skill set that can be used in that particular culture. It's kind of full circle. The picture of the Mayan woman holding the baby, the ceramic one. And that's really symbolic of my life because it symbolizes me having my children. And then I delivered children. And then I came to the university and taught people how to be parents. And now I'm back working with parents of dying children and dying parents. So it really just symbolizes my entire essence of who I am. And again, they're just precious people, just so precious. And that would be my advice to young college students is travel now while you can, you know, while your hearts are still wide open and your eyes are still wide open. And it will change you in ways that you never thought. They'll touch you in ways that you just never thought possible, you know. Right now in Kansas, 1 in 7 children will go to bed hungry tonight. 1 in 7. 1 in 3 of our college girls have been sexually molested before they step on campus. 1 in 4 on our college campus suffers dating violence, intimate partner violence. Where are we?